So my talk is aimed really at groups and organisations, and it's how we make the carbon landscape a reality. And how we do that really, when we're talking about making the carbon landscape a reality, we're often talking about where's the money coming from. So I thought I'd just do a quick whistle-stop tour around how we can get money for groups. And I thought the first question I should ask is actually, why is it so hard? And the reality is that money has been completely squeezed out the voluntary and community sector. So alongside public sector cuts, we've also seen massive differences to the voluntary and community sector. So what was once easy, perhaps 15 years ago, is no longer easy. And so we have to sort of be more creative in the ways that we approach this. And we're finding as well that big lottery funding is increasingly used to actually address hardship and day-to-day problems that people are experiencing in their lives, and so perhaps sometimes environmental projects get squeezed out in that. The last point I really wanted to make was that 100,000 people live within walking distance of the carbon landscape. That's a lot of people. If you actually look at the carbon landscape, it's just hugged by communities, and some of those are some of the most deprived communities in the UK as well. So it's worth bearing in mind that there's this real sort of disconnect as well of how we make sort of these green spaces available to the people who live on the edges of them. So one of the first go-to places is Awards for All. Awards for All is a big lottery funding. It's for up to 10%, and it's a really good one for friends groups and groups. They really want to see the people side, so they're really interested in what difference is it going to make to people's lives, what difference is it going to make to communities, how can we see people go on a journey to improve themselves. And they're really up for paying for things like infrastructure, training and events. So they won't pay for staff time, but they'll pay for someone for you to bring a consultant in, for example. Then if we want some sort of more big scale capital works, then the Landfill Tax are often the place to go to. And again, they'll actually pay for staff time, and they'll pay up to £100,000, but usually what we find the awards are half of that amount. But this is a sort of really vital piece of the funding jigsaw really for getting projects happening on the carbon landscape. Tesco bag scheme, which is part of corporate social responsibility, has become a really integral part of Friends Group accessing funding to make things happen. And it's not just Tesco's, there's the Co-op do it, Asda do it, these token schemes. This is a really good way actually to sort of generate interest of what's going on your site as well. So often local communities are very connected to their green spaces, but if they also see in their local shop that there's a campaign to, I don't know, build a boardwalk could be an example of that, then they're likely to get behind it. And also sometimes individual businesses will provide sponsorship to a site as well. Within Wigan, Warrington and Salford, there will be local grant funders. So an example of that in Salford would be the Hamilton Davids Trust. And it's really important, I think, that you're developing a relationship with the grant makers. It's not just enough just to send unsolicited, even if they're really well written letters, it makes no difference. People react to people, so it's important that people get to know each other. And what we find with local grant makers is that often they really need to see that there is a community sense of ownership. It's about improving the community, but also there's legacy past the grant. So they're not interested in funding something that just might have an impact for a couple of months. They want to see something with long-lasting impacts. So improving access would be an example of that. So what support can you get from the carbon landscape? So there's a really, I hope Tony doesn't mind me putting this image of him up. But these are the guys from Westy. So we've got Liz, Steve and Chris on this image, as well as Steve. And one of the things we can do is we can help develop a sense of place. So the project that I manage is called Sense of Place. And we can help with every aspect of that. So it might be governance, so helping a group get a constitution, get its officers, help with fundraising. Before you can fundraise, you need to see that there's actually a need for what you do. So we could help on the side of community consultation. We could come out with you, speak to people, make sure that actually what you want is what other people want. For some groups who are much further ahead in their sort of journey, it might be that they just want a second person to look over their grant applications. So I'm more than happy to do proofreading. I do that quite a bit for the guys that are friends of Cadis Head, a little Wilden Moss, and that's a really useful. It makes me feel useful as well. And the carbon landscape partnership was written in such a way that we can provide up to 10% match funding to the total value of £1,000. So for example, if you had a successful awards for all at £10,000, we could add an additional £1,000 to that. Another form of funding which is becoming increasingly popular is crowdfunding. That's where you do sort of like a video online and then try and get people to pledge amounts of money. There's no examples of that on the carbon landscape that I know, but it's just another one to throw into the mix. I think a comfort zone really often for groups is to do some level of trading. So this is some images from Princes Park Garden Centre, which Tony mentioned before. These guys have varying levels of disability, and they didn't have a market to sell their plants. So here they came up with the perfect solution: we'll grow plants for the moss. And this is actually them coming out on the day and actually planting them as well. So the seed is actually collected from the moss as well. So it has provenance, it's from the local area. And this also, by us paying for those plants from the garden centre, gives them some financial sustainability. So this idea of a circular economy. Also, if you have a campaign, a specific campaign, so the first image is from the Save Chat Moss campaign, and the second image is sort of literally hot off the press. It is an image of a dragonfly made by a woman called Alison Aitkins, who is from Remag. Unfortunately, the guys from Remag have left, but she's made this beautiful enamel brooch, and they're going on sale after Easter. So as soon as, I'm sure we'll be publicising them on the Carbon Landscape site, but again, to raise money for the tower that sadly burnt down last year. We can help with training, as we've mentioned. One of the ideas is to get money from basic bread and butter kind of stuff. These reindeer, I was involved in the production line with those reindeer. But also it might be for some sort of more artisan products like spoon, I can't think of the word, spoon carving, that's the word I'm looking for, or other kind of Coppice products. And in the same ilk is the weaving there, this new cut there, and Friends of Gorse Covert Mound, making animals to go into the woods there. And then the final slide really is to do with the bread and butter of what friends groups get up to, and that is often just having a donation box out while they run events. And I know a lot of the groups here are involved in these kind of activities that are very, very popular within the local community. They become sort of deeply rooted within the community, and they're really good fun as well. And there's a really nice image. I do like this image. Everyone looks really cold on this image, but it was a very cold, foggy day when we did the Santa Dash at Little Walden Moss. So that's the end of my talk for making it a reality.